keeping well, and I hope you can hear me okay. If you are new to this channel, we've had a few new subscribers in the last couple of days. Welcome. You have chosen both a really good and a really bad time to join us. It's a bad time because my regular lens is still in the menders, being mended. So I'm using my zoom lens, which means that the camera just there has to be a really long way away from where I am, and it also makes a weird ticking noise, which I'm sure you can probably hear. So the quality may not be the best, and I hope that you can hear me all right. I'm trying to talk a bit louder than usual. But hopefully the good thing about joining us will make up for it. And if you haven't yet done so, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications button to be notified when there are new videos. Like this video and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think, and that all helps the channel. And as I say, thank you for stopping by. It's great to see you. The reason this is a good time to join the channel is that I'm about to start something new. This time of year, as things are getting dark and dismal, and I start thinking about next year, is the time of year that I tend to start doing scenery projects, start thinking at least about scenery projects. And this is one that I have been working on for quite a while. And I decided, as I'm doing demo games at Beachhead in February, and I'll have a stand at Salute again next year, and I'm doing a few other shows as well next year. And of course, we are hoping to have our annual Games Day again. So if you're interested in coming to play some Woods in lovely Gloucestershire woodland, please do head over to the Woods Facebook page. You can find that via our Oakbound Facebook page. And you'll find a link to a survey for possible dates for that for next year, and fill in which ones you'll be interested in attending, and that will give you some more details as well. And I'm going to have a new table ready for that as well. So lots of things to think about, and it seemed like a good time to be getting on with this table that I've been wanting to make for a long time. You can see some bits here surrounding me that may give you a bit of an idea of what kind of table it is. Now, a few things have conspired to produce this table, but it is the kind of thing that was in my head when I was writing the Woods in the first place. Going way back. You may have heard me mention this before, but the Woods rules started out as the Factious Waste rules, which of course are still available and have been modified since reworking them for the Woods. But it started off as Factious Waste, which started off as a way of reimagining the kind of Necromunda rules, original Necromunda, not the newer one, but thinking about how they could be made a bit more interesting, a bit more interactive in terms of working with the environment, taking advantage of the multi-leveled boards and features and things that were a major part of those games. And so the Woods evolved out of that, and at the back of my head was always this idea that tables should be multi-leveled. There should be lots of different sort of gangways and walkways and underpasses and caves and sniping positions and that kind of thing, which is all fine and easy to do in a sci-fi, but it's a bit harder to do in a fantasy game. And they managed it with Mordheim, of course, the Games Workshop sort of skirmish fantasy game, because that was set in a derelict city, so you've got bits of crumbling buildings, architecture, bridges, walkways, that kind of thing, that you can do it with. But when your setting is a Dark Age or a sort of prehistoric setting, then it's a bit harder to have those kind of big grand structures. So we've had a few ways of getting around it. We've obviously got the abandoned Fey ruins, which can be used in that kind of setting, and the campaign Cromdencrake that came out in our newsletter in spring of this year, very much played on that idea. It was a crumbling fortress set into a cave network in these cliffs. So you had ramparts and buttresses and towers and caves and lots of ideas for different levels and things, and of course the Queen's Causeway that came in at a later point in that campaign offers a sort of mystical, otherworldly, three-dimensional board to play on as well. And if you missed any of that, it's still available in the archive. So if you go to the news page on our website, sign up for the Acorn, our newsletter, and you'll get access to the archive, which has our previous editions in there, and all the Quantum Craig campaign stuff is back in there, so you can check it out. That was one sort of suggestion. But the thing that was really in the back of my mind while I was writing, while I was producing it, was a sort of treetop walkway kind of thing. And it's very easy to go, oh, this is Endor from Return of the Jedi, and maybe it is. But actually a bit more in my head was the Lost Boys hideout from Hook. That was a big inspiration on me growing up. And unfortunately, I can't really find many photos of that setting construction. There's lots of photos of the Pirate Town set, which is also amazing, but it's a bit too modern for what we've got here. But the woodland hideout with all these boardwalks and zip lines and runways and things, and like a kind of forestry playground, was big in my mind. And also there was a sort of woodland trail when I was a kid near where I was growing up, that was set in sort of treetops, and everything was built out of wood, and they had sort of dinosaur statues and things that you could climb in and out and around, and these big playgrounds with lots of interactive features. So that was also in my head, and I wanted to create very much a kind of Dark Age fantasy version of Necromunda in terms of the set, the scenery. So that was what I decided to start doing for this board. And this is featured in, not this board per se, but the rules for playing on it are featured in the new supplement, which is hopefully coming out in the spring. So I thought this is a good time to maybe produce some articles on making treetop platforms and things, so that you can have a board ready when that game comes out, or when that supplement rather comes out. And that book's going to have rules for platforms and elevated positions and gantries with railings, but also for more fun things. So there are zip lines and slides and swings in there, and rules for cutting rope ladders when people are climbing up them, and all kinds of stuff like that. So very, very terrain based things. And so I wanted to use that as the setting for this board, and create the Leprechaun's home of Frondleaf in the Whitewood, which is the setting that supplement, or that part of that supplement anyway, takes place in. And Frondleaf is a sort of Scandinavian pine forest. Ordinarily, a lot of the forests and the woodlands in the woods is very old English deciduous ancient oak woodlands, that kind of thing. And I would like to do platforms in oak trees and things, but for this I decided to go with the pine forest, partly because it's, in terms of the environment that setting works in, the pine forests work better for it. But there are some practical reasons for having big pine trees on the tabletop as well. As you can see from these ones that I've done in front here, there's very little canopy because they're big trees, big tall trees. So all the canopy is above the level of the tabletop. So you can have these very densely packed trees and still be able to move miniatures in amongst them without having to deal with foliage, and the sightlines stay quite clear and quite easy, but it still looks like woodland. So it's much easier to move troops around if you've got these big tall straight trees with very little foliage on them. So that's one consideration. The other thing is the straightness of the trunk. So you can have these platforms coming out at regular intervals, without having to take into account the sort of the twist and the turns of the trunks, which are a bit more complex to work with. It does mean that it has a very specific look to it, and it does look a bit a bit Endory. And I'm trying to do something about that with these balusters. Balusters? Is that balusters? Railings. Anyway, railings. These railings here that are bits of tree root or bush root. So I'm trying very much to steer away from regular straight lines. I've talked previously about going to Puzzlewood in the Forest of Dean, and all of the platforms and walkways there have these very twisted branch railings, which gives it a really organic feel, stops it from looking too like something man-made slapped in the middle of it, keeps it looking foresty. So I tried to achieve that as well. It's slightly difficult here. Let me get an Imperial Guard model that doesn't fit. It's slightly difficult here because you've got to be able to put the bases on and move them around as well. And these guys are on 25mm bases, so they're absolutely fine. But most of my wood stuff is on 30mm bases. So I didn't want to make the platforms really, really wide. So these are wide enough for me to fit a base sort of sliding slightly under the railing there. So they are big enough to fit the bases in, but it's a bit tight in some cases. So that's been a bit of a thing that I've had to sort of play with to get it looking convincing and natural, but being able to put models on. And these heights are important as well. Like with buildings, it's very obvious if you've got building levels that are very far apart, but really anything less than 3 inches, which is quite high in model terms, but I find it really difficult, especially if you're reaching across the table, to put anything in a space that's less than 3 inches. So 3 inches is very definitely the minimum that I would go for on these trees, and that's built into the rules as well. A building level is per 3 inches, or a platform level is per 3 inches. And I put a slide on this one so that the model that's at the top here can slide all the way down, and I'm going to have swings and zip lines and all of the things that are featured in the supplement will be on this board, so that we can play them, test them, make sure that they work, but also I can play them in demo games and add as much interest as possible into the board. This is supposed to be the Leprechaun's hideout, so when I was positioning these railings, I wanted to make sure that they weren't so high up that they didn't look in place for the Leprechaun models that are quite small. But I also wanted to be able to use regular human-sized models on the same board, so I had to sort of compromise and put them so they're a bit lower than railings would be on a regular human-sized model, and they're a bit high. They're sort of head height for the Leprechauns, but hopefully there's a bit of a compromise there, and they don't look out of place. And I've made all of these platforms out of matchsticks, and I've tried to give it a kind of nesty look to it, because the Leprechauns live amongst owls in the Whitewood, and the owls are probably the ones who've mostly built this. The Leprechauns are fairly lazy. I'd imagine they wouldn't want to put more effort into this than they absolutely had to. So I'm imagining the owls have mostly built this, and they built it looking like a nest. That being the construction that they're used to, and it means I've put lots of holes. You probably won't be able to see them from this distance, but I've put lots of holes in the trees here so that I can hide owls and also squirrels and hedgehogs and other little creatures in amongst the trees to give some added interest. And if you're interested in knowing how I made the trees, that's in the most recent edition of the Acorn that came out last week. And it's not too late to get your hands on that, because you can just sign up to the Acorn on our website, and you'll get access to the archive, which in the last edition, the November edition, has how I made these trees, how I made and painted those. Next edition we'll be talking about these platforms and walkways and gantries and things that I'm going to be building to go across. So it'll be part of an ongoing series on building this table. But I'm at this point now where I've painted these trees, and in fact the article on painting them does talk about how I did paint these, but I was originally going to take a different approach. The dry brushing approach is the one that I normally do on trees, although I normally don't go as brown as with these, because I prefer trees to look kind of grey or green, a bit mossy. Not many trees that you see are actually brown, but these redwood, pine, giant sequoia type trees are actually quite reddy brown. So I have gone with that colour. I normally choose a colour that's fairly muted because I want the figures to show up against it. So I'm hoping that this isn't going to be too pronounced a colour. I think it will be alright because it's fairly, although it's a fairly saturated colour, it's also it's quite neutral. It's not one of the primary colours, so hopefully you will still be able to see other figures quite clearly against it. And I think once it's in with loads of greenery around it as well, that will mute it down somewhat. But my original plan for these was going to be to use a kind of crackle paint effect on it to try and get that flaky, segmented, fractured bark look that you have on pine type trees. And I didn't want to buy loads of crackle effect because I didn't know if it was going to work properly. But also I would need quite a lot. These are only a few of the trees. There are lots more trees than this that I would need to do it on. So that would work out quite expensive buying the sort of official model makers crackle paints. But as with everything that are available as specific mediums for modelers to work with, there are often ways of making it cheaper yourself with regular materials that work just as well. So I had a look on some forums, and it does seem like there's an easy way of making crackle paint by just putting a layer of PVA glue or acrylic medium, something like Mod Podge, on there, waiting for it to be almost dry, and then painting over the top. And because the paint and the medium dry at different rates, it cracks when it dries out fully. But I tried this with an emulsion and with an acrylic paint, and I was getting quite large cracks, which would probably be fine if you were doing that horrible shabby chic thing that people seem to like to do, where they take a really nice piece of furniture and then paint it to look awful. Which, to be fair, most of the sites that I was looking at for sort of crackle paint techniques were those kind of sites. One of those sites that I was looking at then suggested that I have a look at chalk paint, because that cracks more apparently than emulsion, and acrylic cracks better. That's that kind of never really dries properly, rubs off on your trousers kind of paint that people who like shabby chic stuff tend to really like. It's normally in really horrible pastel colours. Anyway, so I went to a couple of local hardware shops to try and find some chalk paint to play with, and they didn't have any. And at that point I thought, I'm not ordering stuff. I'm going to go back to normal dry brushing over textured paint. So that's what I did, and I think it looks all right, but it's a bit of a shame. I would like to try the crackle effect at a later point, because I think that would give an extra sort of level of realism if I could get the cracks really small. My worry is that the cracks would be quite big, which looks rubbish on furniture, but okay, that's what they want. Looks burnt on furniture, or it looks all right for scenic art stuff, but not so good for small models. They need to be really tiny cracks. But anyway, something to play with for a later project. But my big quandary over painting at the moment now is that, having done these trunks like this and made my matchstick platforms here, I now need to colour these platforms. And I quite like the really pale look, but they do look a bit like they're just matchsticks at the moment. And I was thinking of staining them with wood stains, but because I've used PVA glue to hold them in place, I think where that's soaked in, I would just get patches where the stain wouldn't take. Maybe I could use a spirit-based stain. I don't know if that would work. but I think it would be hard to get the staining to have a uniform look, and I want them to kind of grey out a little bit, look a bit more weathered than this. So I don't know. So I'm interested in what you think. I want the platforms to contrast, to look really noticeably different from the sort of living bark of the trunks. But I don't really know how to go about it. It needs to do a bit more research. But yeah, so I'm interested in what you think. What do you think I should do with these platforms, with these walkways, to make them look a bit more worn, a bit more natural, a bit less like I've just made these out of a million matchsticks. So many matchsticks, but then they are nice and strong. So yeah, I would be interested in your input into that as the project goes forwards. And this is just step one, because I'm doing some trees that are set into rock bits. So I wanted to bring in some more of the puzzle world ideas and have some kind of snaky passages running through rock faces to get to the sort of inner sanctum of the leprechaun. So there are some trees that are sunk into rock faces. I need to do those bits. There's going to be a sacred well feature in the middle, and then I want to do a board. These will sit fine on the modular boards that I already have, but I want to do a sort of forest floor board, which is a lot more browns, a lot more earthy, a lot less sort of grass. Although I've had a look at some photos of pine forest, and there is grass growing in them. I want it to look a bit more sort of earthy, a bit more loamy, I guess, around the base. So my plan is to do that with latex and earth and tea and coffee on a sheet of calico or muslin or something. To give a sort of roll up, but not one of these printed vinyl nasty looking things where you can see the same pattern repeated over and over again. I want something that looks that continues the kind of organic look of these. So that's my plan anyway. So I will keep you informed. There will be more videos and there will be some tutorials in the Acorn in months to come. So if you haven't already gone over to oakbound.co.uk/news and signed up to our newsletter, please do that. There's loads of great content in there. It's not just modelling articles. You'll also find out about events that we're going to, new releases that we've got coming out. But also, I'm always trying to put some game content into those newsletters, whether it's a new rule for a new creature type or a look at a different way of playing, maybe some strategy articles, that kind of thing. I always want there to be some game content in there as well, so it's not just us telling you what's now available for you to sell. There's some content there as well for you. I think it's worth signing up for, so please do go over there and sign up. Like our Facebook page, join the Woods group if you're interested in finding out more about how this game works. It's quite unique. If you haven't played it yet or haven't come across it, take a look. We've got some videos on how to play it on our channel, and we'll have a playthrough at some point in the future, I promise. It is worth looking at. I think it's a quite an interesting and unique fantasy skirmish system. And yeah, like, subscribe, and hit the notifications button for the video, and then you'll find out when I'm going to be talking more about these trees and everything else on this channel. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again next time. Take care.